Alright, this blog post is called The Silent Calling, and I really said a lot, even though it's called The Silent Calling, but it's really about how all this stuff unraveled, and I knew I needed to pursue it, but I needed to just write it down and then go over it piece by piece myself through different blog posts. So I'm not going to give too much commentary in the beginning, and I'm going to try not to go too in depth as I read it, because it ends up actually going in depth on its own, and it'll explain a lot of the things that this whole blog is kind of expands on and focuses on. And anyway, I'll just start reading it. The book I was writing about in the previous post, the Book of the Law, or Liber AL vel Legis, is not particularly easy to understand, and it is not meant to be, for it is a fragment of forbidden wisdom, and there is a warning that all who discuss its contents are to be shunned as centers of pestilence. This is rather peculiar owing to its supreme importance in the 93 current, a term referring to the general teaching of Thelema by Crowley. It is important to understand why this book and its message is important, since it holds many clues to the various pressing issues facing humanity at this current period in history, mysteries that neither orthodox science or religion can adequately respond to alone. That being said, this subject should be looked into by searching online for more info, since it is quite difficult to try and condense it all in a summary. If one can hold on long enough, she or he can get to some very interesting knowledge, which may end up being pertinent to understanding the new existential and eschatological problems we are facing in possessing such powerful technologies as we now do. Like I mentioned in the last post, the Book of the Law, or the book, consists of 3 chapters. Each chapter is being voiced from a different character. Chapter 1 is voiced by the Egyptian sky goddess Nuit, who is the goddess of infinite space. Chapter 2 is voiced by Hadit, the masculine counterpart to Nuit, represented by the point, the sphere, or the winged disc, which symbolizes the individualized subjective seed self within the heart of man. Chapter 3 is voiced by Ra-Hoor-Khuit, which is the name of the active aspect of Horus, who is the offspring of Nuit and Hadit. Ra-Hoor-Khuit has a passive counterpart as well, named Hor-Par-Krat, and these dual aspects are likened to the roles played by Horus as the sun god and Set as the god of sunset or night. Crowley sums up the speakers of the 3 chapters. We have Nuit, space, and Hadit, the point of view. These experience congress and so produce Heru-Ra-Ha, who combines the ideas of Ra-Hoor-Khuit and Hor-Par-Krat. And Heru-Ra-Ha is basically just the manifest Ra. Ra being the sun, and Ra is obviously the sun, Set is obviously the sunset, and if you add Ra and Set, it's 666, which I probably shouldn't have said. I later talked about this, but it just shows how 666 contains this, like, the code of, light and dark, but from the Egyptian point of view, but yet in English, yet using the Hebrew applied to English. And it's just, people say, oh, that's, what is it? Cherry picking, you're looking for it. But I didn't even find that intentionally. Kenneth Grant doesn't note it, or no one really even talks about that anywhere I've found. But if you keep it in mind, you'll see that this interplay of, it's like the war, the battle of good and evil between Ra, or Horus, and Set, plays out through this whole coding process, or like the manifestation process itself. And Liber AL kind of talks about this and knows about it, and so it's just significant. Liber AL vel Legis was originally entitled Liber L vel Legis, and it was an early student of Crowley's order, the Silver Star, named Freder Achad, who discovered particular Kabbalistic keys encoded in the text that convinced Crowley to change the title on account of multiple prophetic verses having been fulfilled by Achad's discoveries. Just to clarify, the word Freder is Latin for brother and refers to a male member of a monastery or religious organization. The female equivalent is soror. This is where the words fraternity and sorority come from for college social groups. Achad is an English rendering for the Hebrew achad, aleph, chet, daleth. Some people pronounce it akid, and you can pronounce it however you want, which means one or unity. It is tradition to take a new name or magical motto when taking an oath of a grade in the order, but Frater Achad was also his pen name. Frater Achad's real name was Charles Robert John Stansfeld Jones, and his role in Crowley's work is very important, as I will show in due course. The main thing he discovered was the key of it all, referred to in verse 47 of chapter 3. This book shall be translated into all tongues, but always with the original in the writing of the beast. For in the chance shape of the letters and their position to one another, in these are mysteries that no beast shall divine. Let him not seek to try, but one cometh after him, whence I say not, who shall discover the key of it all. Then this line drawn is a key, then this circle squared in its failure is a key also, and abrahadabra. It shall be his child in that strangely. Let him not seek after this, for thereby alone can he fall from it. The first key is that Liber L, according to Achad, should be changed to Liber AL, for by adding the first letter A, the geometric value of the title AL is then 31, a number that Achad showed to be related to many of the secrets he ended up discovering. Remember that Achad, Aleph 1, Cheth 8, Daleth 4, equals 13, and that 31 is obviously a reversal of 13. Achad ended up also writing a couple important books about the Tree of Life and Kabbalah, and in one he ends up reversing the traditional paths of the tree after finding out that reversing things can yield significant hidden meanings. From that point on, Achad used reversals and inversions quite obsessively. And some people say that, he went crazy and thereby went into the abyss, or therefore none of his writings are worth reading. And I would say they're actually really important, and Kenneth Grant saw that they were too. Basically what Kenneth Grant saw was that some of Achad's writings, which weren't even public or printed and still have yet to be, because I'll get into that later on, but they started certain things that he wrote about and very few people knew about. He started to see it manifest basically through other people, and that's why he saw it important. So we'll just have to get into it slowly. And anyway, Achad pointed out that 31 is 1/3 of 93, clarifying the connection in verse 39, which is 13 times 3, of chapter 1, where it says the word of the law is thelema. Thelema, being 93 in Greek gematria, is the reversal of 39, obviously. This is clarified to be a true Kabbalah, or reception, since 93 plus 39 equals 132, the number of Kabbalah, the Hebrew spelling of Kabbalah, which means to receive. Al, or Aleph Lamed, is translated as God, and is the root of the Arabic Allah, or it's related to it. The reversal of Al, La, Lamed Aleph, means not or nothingness. Therefore, Al equals God, being or manifestation, and La, not, non-being or nothing. This was Achad's justification for the adding of the letter A, for it opened up numerous avenues in the book that were unrecognized by Crowley. And I linked to Achad's a few of his books and his other writings. And another important verse in the book, certainly the most obscure, is verse 76 of the 2nd chapter. It starts off with a cryptogram, an encoded sequence of numbers and letters, and mentions that the prophet, Crowley, will never know what it means, at least in his incarnation as Crowley, and that there will be someone else in the future who will demonstrate what the code actually means. The verse is shown below. 4638 ABK, or Aleph Beth Kaf, 24 ALGMOR, or Aleph Lamed Gimel Mem Ayin Resh, 3 YX, or Yod Zadi, possibly, 2489 RPSTOVAL, or Resh, Pei, Samek, or Shin, Teth, or Tau, Ayin Vav Aleph Lamed. What meaneth this, O prophet? Thou knowest not, nor shalt thou know ever. There cometh one to follow thee, he shall expound it. But remember, O chosen one, to be me, to follow the love of Mu in the starlit heaven, to look forth upon men, to tell them this glad word. No single person has uncovered the meaning of this verse quite like the British writer and occultist Kenneth Grant. Grant was a student of Crowley and has 9 main books that give a detailed analysis of everything I have so far attempted to summarize and more. Much of his work centers around the discoveries made by Achad, which Grant further labored to unveil. Kenneth Grant has a few other books, but I will leave those out for now. The 9 that I will be referencing are known as the Typhonian Trilogies. They were written from 1972 to 2002, and since they are hard to obtain, few people have actually read them, or read them all, and even fewer have understood their importance. They were printed in limited numbers, so they generally run fairly expensive. Well, at the time I wrote this, they hadn't started reprinting, this whole trilogy. Well, Starfire Publishing hadn't, and I guess Beyond the Mauve Zone and The Ninth Arch had limited runs. But yeah, they're relatively hard to come by. The second installment of the 9. I first came across his books when looking for affordable Crowley books on eBay, and I ended up getting Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, the second installment of the 9, which hardly helped me to understand anything better. Instead, I just had a few more questions, until I read a few more in the series and started getting familiar with the concepts and terminology. I was able to get the rest of them for relatively cheap on eBay, in the random order they became available. Even though they're supposed to be read one after another, I read them as I was able to buy them, which was sort of difficult for a while until I had them all, though in the meantime I read digital versions and did what I could to try and fill in the gaps where he made references to the books I hadn't yet gotten. This is an Austin Osman Spare drawing of him. I was beginning to make certain discoveries of my own when I soon read that he had died from a prolonged sickness on January 15, 2011. Looking back, I wish I would have read his books a little sooner so I could have met him, but that was apparently not what fate intended. After a few months of reading, I came to realize that I was destined to read them exactly when I did, since the number of years it had been since certain events he wrote about started to form a pattern, not only in the books, but also within my own life. A number of coincidences began surfacing in some subtle and not so subtle ways, which I started to document as I progressed in my research. The most important occurrence was that I unintentionally acquired an obsidian egg on the very important day, which Grant says was a date in which Frater Achad made specific discoveries, on April 2nd, 1948, his 62nd birthday. I got mine April 2nd, 2011, regarding an egg, and its relation to the cryptogram of verse 76 mentioned above, which ends with the letters oval, or OVAL, further denoting the egg. What is most relevant is that I got the egg before reading in Grant's book Cults of the Shadow, where he first mentions this particular discovery of Achad's. I ended up getting Outside the Circles of Time before I was able to get Cults of the Shadow, so it was in Outside the Circles of Time that I found out that April 2nd, 1948, was the date Frater Achad announced that Crowley's Aeon of Horus was to be succeeded by the Aeon of Maat, bringing about a whole different Aeonic formula. He also claimed that it corresponded with the transition from the Piscean astrological age to the age of Aquarius, 6 days later on the 44th year of the Aeon of Horus. Many people found this claim to be premature since an eon is meant to last around 2,000 years. Nevertheless, Grant has worked to show that the Kabbalistic evidence Achad produced to back up his claim may in fact be valid, since they correlate with much of the changes we have seen over the last century. And see, the thing is that Grant says about the Aeon of Maat, since you've got the Aeon of Isis, the Aeon of Osiris, the Aeon of Horus, well, the Aeon of Maat really is, it's in the Ninth Arch, I forget what verse, but he says is contained in the egg. Well, the egg is the 0 point. The Aeon of Maat is really, I wouldn't say the fourth dimension, but being the fourth, or the final He of the Yod He Vav He in the daughter aspect, corresponds with basically the knowledge that we're going to eventually obtain, which I believe is the knowledge of space and time, timelines, and outside the circles of time, obviously references this whole idea. So, again, I'm not going to get sidetracked because I end up talking about it here, but before the present Aeon of Horus, mankind was in a period known as the Aeon of Osiris, where paternalism and male dominance prevailed. For example, the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are all patriarchal religions asserting God as the father and emphasizing the masculine component in social hierarchy. Before the Eon of Osiris was the Eon of Isis, referring back to when humanity worshipped the Mother Nature, in the feminine aspect. The Eon of Isis was around the time of pagan religions and the hunter-gatherer period of man's development, which ended up being eradicated by the Assyrian religions. The Eon of Horus refers to the present age in the sense that, as the sun, the emphasis is upon the individual rather than the group, as in conventional social schemes of the past. Horus as the child represents self-empowerment through the personal attainment of the true will, which can only come by the shedding of outdated belief systems and dogmas of the Osirian age and finding your own personal path. The Eon of Maat is regarded as the Eon of truth and justice, and signifies the time where the soul of man is weighed against Maat's feather of truth. And that's obviously in the Egyptian tradition after death or in the afterlife. And so really the Eon of Maat, again, is outside the circles of time. But us coming into this knowledge, we will see that it's kind of been there all along. And anyway, this Eon represents the maturation of the human spirit into balance and perfection in the attainment of mastery over the lower animal drives, which are now being confronted by man, giving him a chance to either progress towards the light of truth or fall into a dark age that will terminate in his, or our, own annihilation. And again, that corresponds to the whole perfection, or the perfect eon, perfect ion, or the Ma-ion, as Friedrich Chod termed it, and found through these keys of the Book of the Law. It's basically the Tikkun Olam, or the reparation of the fall of Malkuth, and the sealing or the unsealing of the abyss. Many Thelemites disagree that the Eon of Maat could have begun so early, though Achad specified that his announcement was one part of the incoming of a dual current of greater and lesser cycles, the greater being the inauguration of the Eon of Horus in Cairo by Crowley in 1904, and the lesser cycle concerning what he termed the Ma-ion as the daughter aspect and continuation of Horus, which he announced on April 2, 1948, with the reception of the word Ma-ion. And again, this dual current, or double current, was focused on by the Horus Maat Lodge, which their website has gone through a lot of changes, and they're not really around as much anymore. And Nima Andahadna, who sent Kenneth Grant her book Liber Pene Penumbra, and it talks about Maat. This is one of the people who showed Grant basically that Achad's knowledge concerning Maat and all that was manifesting, even though no one really knew how much emphasis he put on it right before he died, basically in the late 40s. And anyway, this website is really good. I would recommend anyone go to read it, look up its history. The word Ma-ion came as an inspiration to Achad when trying to uncover the secret word mentioned in chapter 1, verse 20. The key of the rituals is in the secret word which I have given unto him. Achad came to the conclusion that Ma-ion was this secret key of the rituals on the basis that the first and last verses of chapter 1 contain the 13-letter word manifestation in a rather unusual way. Had the manifestation of Nuit, and the manifestation of Nuit is at an end. Achad took the last verse literally and considered the ends of Ma Nefestat Ion to be the secret word of Nuit, and the true name of the Eon of Ma or Maat as the secretion or the secret Ion of Nuit, or the perfect Ion. And being 107, it connects with 17 in the egg, 17 being the combination of all the 16 kalas. There is so much more beyond what I've tried to convey, and if you haven't done any research into the various things I've mentioned so far, then it is unlikely you will be able to see the importance of what I am saying. The subject I'm here describing is one of the more elusive areas of Grant and Crowley's work, but it is the core of what I'm trying to demonstrate. If you have not yet availed yourself to any of the material I have presented, you might want to so you can more accurately comprehend what I am talking about. Though nothing appeared to validate Achad's claim that the Eon of Truth and Justice had initiated, the year before his announcement was very important in that the planet dramatically changed with the advent of a number of significant occurrences. 1947 was the year Aleister Crowley died, and it was also the beginning of what's been termed the UFO age, starting with the alleged crash of an alien spacecraft in Roswell, New Mexico, and the reports of flying saucers by Kenneth Arnold, along with an influx of other reports about unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial entities. Incidentally, 1947 was the year the United States Central Intelligence Agency was also created. Also, a number of ancient biblical texts were found in the Middle East which indicated the presence of extraterrestrial beings in the past around the time of the formation of modern civilization. These texts were hidden by early religious heretics when they faced execution by early Christians and are known as the Nag Hammadi Library and the Dead Sea Scrolls. These two I will elaborate on at a later time. Since 47, the subject of ufology has reached incredible proportions. There is more than enough evidence to show without a doubt that something beyond our present comprehension has been increasingly affecting our existence since these events took place. It is almost as if we are making our way toward a definitive contact with another species or race of intelligent creatures. And it is all in the context of the eons of Horus and Maat that such a situation can be explained as veritable manifestations of what Achad was hinting at in his revelations in 1948. Kenneth Grant explains a lot of this in his books, and there are many articles available on the internet that discuss the various connections surrounding the occult activities of Crowley and his fellow disciples. Crowley, Achad, and Grant are the primary characters whose work I will be discussing, so familiarization with each of their roles is necessary to understand my own original insights, which I will soon divulge. The nature of this subject matter is very specialized and esoteric. Only someone well-versed in Kabbalistic correspondences and the prominent spiritual teachings of old can work their way through the web without getting tied up or turned away. I came to realize that my own reading and induction into Grant's writings was the commencement of my own private initiation into the magical tradition that Crowley effectually revived. The connections I found between my own name and birth date and certain components of Grant's discourses slowly but undeniably crept through to my awareness as I progressed. Soon, events started occurring that I came to realize as magical manifestations of mystical inceptions, all of which particularly centered around the obsidian egg I got prior to reading about Crowley and Achad's egg. Since there are so many interconnected aspects of this puzzle, it is difficult to begin giving an account of the egg and the large picture surrounding it. I suppose I might as well begin with the general numerical affirmations that first started becoming clear to me. The book I was reading when most of this became clear to me was Grant's fifth installment of the trilogies, Outside the Circles of Time, published in 1980. This book deals with the Eon of Maat as expressed by Achad in particular, as well as how another writer named Nima Andahadna, who was unaware of Achad's work, published her own work that tapped into the same stream of knowledge about the Egyptian goddess Maat. Grant discusses the connections between the two independent systems and how they come to form a relationship that would forever change the future of Thelema. There is a particular circle of time that Grant refers to in Chapter 8 regarding the cyclical reappearance of an egg once every 7 years from when it was first mentioned in Liber Ale, Chapter 1, verse 49, to 1946, when Grant was initiated into the mysteries himself as Frater Eosic. I am unique and conqueror. I am not of the slaves that perish. Be they damned and dead. Amen. This is of the four. There is a fifth who is invisible, and therein am I as a babe in an egg. The transcripts of Achad's writings on the Eon of Maat, or Ma'ayan, have still been unpublished 32 years since they were first mentioned in Outside the Circles of Time, though Starfire Publishing is supposed to release them later this year. See, they've been saying this since 2010, but they had to go reprint the whole Typhonian trilogies, which I could understand, to regenerate interest, and then they've recently had a fire, and so who knows when the official and unofficial correspondences of Frater Achad will be published, if they ever will. but they're just at the they're in some Gerald York collection, I believe, in England, and someone needs to go and take pictures and put them online, because Crowley's work, or a lot of Crowley's stuff, is at the Harry Ransom Center in Austin. The egg I got in the midst of these revelations symbolizes my acquiring of the 93 and 696 current as prophesied by Liber AL. This is clarified by the fact that the word Ma'ayan equals 107, which is the number of years between 1904 and 2011 when I obtained an obsidian egg, and that equals 107 in simple gematria. 107 is also, as Achad notes, the number of oval, the symbol of the fifth element, Akasha and spirit, as well as Ulam, the Sanskrit word for consciousness, which the fifth element symbolizes. It's also the Akasha, which I didn't find until later on. Furthermore, 107 is 5 more than 102, the number of my name in simple gematria, as well as Mayat plus Team, the reverse, which signifying the dual current of Mayat. Mayat, 51, has a counterpart similar to Horus and Set named Mayut. It's like the dark vulture, the darker aspect of Mayat. Mayut is 56, so Mayat and Mayut, her dark side, is 107. 5 is also connected to me in being the number of my life path when you add up the birth month, day, and year, which is obtained by adding, as I just said, the numbers in my birth date and then reducing them by addition to a single number. Therefore, I, as 102, obtained the egg, 5, and found my true will, or life path, to be that of the double-wanded one referred to in Liber AL, chapter 3, verse 34. But your holy place shall be untouched throughout the centuries, though with fire and sword it be burnt down and shattered, yet an invisible house there standeth, and shall stand until the fall of the great equinox, when Hermachus shall arise, and the double-wanded one assume my throne and place. Another prophet shall arise, and bring fresh fever from the skies. Another woman shall awake the lust and worship of the snake. Another soul of God and beast shall mingle in the globed priest. Another sacrifice shall stain the tomb. Another king shall reign, and blessing no longer be poured to the hawk-headed mystical lord. First and foremost, the verse 34 times the chapter number 3 equals 102. 102 is the geometric value of the 13 letters in my name, and the 0 in 102 can be thought of as a hidden reference to the number 13, similar to the 12 zodiacal signs around the sun. This shows the relation between 13, the number of letters in my name, and the word manifestation in 102. Ma'ayan as 107 refers to the secretion or secret ion of Nuit, the goddess of space, in the form of an egg, and thus the whole manifestation of Nuit, Hadit, Rahur Kuit. Ma'ayan can also be rendered as 171, which is the sum of the numbers 1 through 18. I was 18 when I received the egg, though I was in my 19th year of life. 19 is egg in simple gematria. And to further the already ambiguous connections, Ma'ayan can also be enumerated as 821 when n is given its final value of 700. 821 is a number connected to me in that I was born August 21st of 1992. Since Frater Achad announced the incoming of Ma'ayan in 1948, 44 years had elapsed since the inauguration of the Eon of Horus in 1904. 44 years after 1948 happens to be 1992 when I was born. 44 is the number of the sum of Achad's key numbers, 13 and 31. Another very important key Achad discovered was in the number 418, which was not only the number of the name Iwas, the transmitter of the Book of the Law, but also the number of the sum of 13 through 31. 418 also came to be the number of Crowley's work, The Vision and the Voice, which contains many hints to the eonology here being described. Note it was 102 years between 2011 when I began my initiation and received the egg, and 1909 when Liber 418 was written. Also, 102 is the number of Tao Te Ching, the book Crowley was working on in 1918, around the time of the Amalantra working, and when he drew the portrait of Lamb. 13 times 31 is 403, the number of Abin Sephira. This is one key to the greater and lesser cycles of Ma'ayan, which I will go into later. To stay within the context of my own discoveries, I will just note that 13 through 31, 418, plus 13 times 31, 403, equals 821, which goes on to show the double wand of power mentioned in Liber AL chapter 3 verse 72 is in fact connected with the eon of Maat and Ma-ion. The significance of the egg in connection with the various manifestations of egg-shaped craft and oval-headed entities since the death of Crowley has only become more apparent with the work of Grant and his references to Achad's discoveries. There is a lot of space given in the trilogies regarding another extraterrestrial intelligence other than Aiwass Crowley trafficked with back in 1918 named Lamb. The portrait Crowley drew of Lamb is up in the top left corner of this page, and it serves as a link to some sources of information. The portrait first appears as the frontispiece to Crowley's commentary on Helena Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence. It was given to Grant as a gift from Crowley in 1945, and it forms an integral part of the trilogies as being the link between the eons of Horus and Maat. It is here relevant considering the fact it was drawn many decades before the common depiction of gray aliens, which began to manifest in 1947, likely as a result of the multiple atomic weapons tests in the area beginning a few years before in 1945, the same year he got the portrait. The dual or double current is the functional interpretation of the relationship between Horus and Maat. Kenneth Grant says Lamb is the link between the two eons, and is also distinguished as not so much an individual entity, but as a gateway to trans-eonic dimensions of consciousness existing outside the circles of time and space. The translation of the word Lamb in Tibetan is the way, and a Tibetan teacher is called a Lama, meaning he who goeth. Perhaps there is an underlined implication in that the gods of Egypt were described as the treaders of the path, or those whose function was to go, and that Lamb equals 26 in simple gematria could indicate a counterfeit god, also 26. This perspective should be looked at in consideration of the many historical accounts of deceptive beings that try to appear as something they're not. Lamb equals 71 in Hebrew gematria, and the number 107 is related by being the reverse of 71 with the inclusion of an egg, or 0. Since aliens are often described as existing beyond our dimensions and beyond time itself, the Akashic egg is a valid description for just where these entities may be manifesting from. Reports often describe them as having telepathic abilities, which is why they have no ears and small mouths. This is the assumption as to why Crowley put it as the frontispiece to Liber 71, the voice of the silence. 71 is also the number of Allel, nothing, an apparition, signifying beings operating beyond or through the four elements. The significance of the egg I received slowly became obvious as I looked into this obscure area of research. I noticed that not only does my name, 102, and birthday, 821, coincide with the Kabbalistic mysteries concerning Maat, but that they also intricately connected with the mystery surrounding Lamb. 102, my name, final H, egg plus man, or eggman, and Lamal, the formula of the cult of Lamb, plus 821, my birthday, August 21st, and Ma-ion, equals 923, which is also 71, Lamb, times 13, manifestation, Achad, Ahaba, and 923 is significant because it's 76 less than 999, 76 being the verse of the whole cryptogram, and 999 being pretty much the key of it all, corresponding with the 0, basically, the full 0, being it's all in the egg. It is then highly significant that my initials are the reverse of Lamb, MAL, and as if to validate this, Grant notes that the palindrome Lamal, Lamed, Aleph, Mem, Aleph, Lamed, equals 102, and that it reveals the true nature of the cult of Lamb as the transmitter of AL, universe A, of or from LA, or La, universe B, via Ma, the daughter. Basically the formula of manifestation, order out of chaos, you could say. It is in fact from the name of the goddess Maat that the term mathematics is derived, since she is the measurer of matter. She is also the mother, the matrix, and the mouth that utters the myth. Thus, being the measurer, gematria is a useful tool for the analysis of the incoming of the eon of Maat. I have here some of my own gematria to give evidence of the undeniably consistent symbology the egg came to represent. As a child, I was always very terrified by aliens. My aunt lived in Payson, Arizona, and told me stories when I was really young about flying saucers that occasionally flew over her house in the mountains. I saw the X-Files and Fire in the Sky as a kid before bed, but I never got nightmares, surprisingly. I noticed that the more I thought about something, the less likely it would appear in a dream. I did have one dream, though, where I woke up without feeling scared or shaken. It was very weird because I was laying on a table looking up at a tall, ugly, translucent, white-skinned alien with a blackish-brown underneath. It was holding a baby in its lengthy hand, and two other aliens were on the side of the room. I can't remember what its face exactly looked like, only that its mouth and eyes were too hideous to bear, or to remember. There was also a man on another table in the room who appeared to be covered in various sized cuts all over his body, like they were doing some experiment, I don't know. The room only had glowing white walls and seemed pretty small. The tall alien in front of me ended up gently running its long finger flat across the baby's face, and a trail of blood followed, as if the alien's finger was sharp like a blade. I was about 12 when I had this dream, and like I said, it never felt scary. I woke up completely calm and even told my dad, who thought it was odd. What made it a little scarier was that when I got older and read about many abduction reports and how the most common number of aliens encountered in visitations and abductions is 3. Basically, I've come to realize that my interest in magic... I'll go back and address that. Basically, this dream was really... The reason I mentioned it was because it was just really powerful and odd. I was really young, and again, I didn't know anything about other than what I've seen on TV and in movies, but it was really archetypal, because the more UFO books I would read, similar things would happen, like with the White Room, and it's like, where... I don't know if this happened... I don't think this would have happened physically. It's more like an astral or psychological experience, but the symbolism is also just what was intriguing, I guess, about it. Basically, I've come to realize that my interest in magic and the occult is written into my personal Kabbalah, and the things I've discovered need to be revealed for those who are destined to encounter them. Since the information above is rather extensive and dense, I will go into all the related areas in time. Whether I succeeded in presenting this data in sufficiently coherent manner depends on the reader's level of awareness and familiarity with the material I've touched upon. The links I have provided are very good resources for getting a better idea of things. When I get into how this information relates to the various accounts by ancient people of aliens, demons, or angels, demons, spirits, and extraterrestrials, what I have been attempting to cover will begin to take shape and become clearer. The fact that these entities might not all be benevolent is the primary reason for why I want to discuss this. The occult connection is merely one facet of this vast subject, and it is all too often ignored or misunderstood by people focused on a particular area. It is extremely urgent that more people become attuned to certain pieces of information so as to not be caught off guard in case something like alien contact ends up happening, especially in the case of an attack or even attempted infiltration. Or, now, since having learned a lot more, even just the threat of an alien invasion or an alien virus or something could easily be faked. So, and a lot could be done in the guise of it. The possibility that an infiltration may have already occurred can be debated, but it is with the context of the information I am presenting that we may be able to redirect our course towards a brighter future, rather than let it be curbed by predatory beings who are far more advanced than us. There was also another experience that I don't know if I didn't talk about in this blog, but I don't know if I talked about it in the next one or how far later on I mention it, but I had a ball of light or an orb come through my window one night when I was trying to go to bed, and I don't expect anyone to necessarily believe me because I wouldn't believe anyone else, but the fact that I saw it and I've tried to, be skeptical and explain it away, I just don't see how something could have passed through the glass like nothing and then responded to my pretty much fear. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't do anything. I felt frozen. But it felt like it responded to that fear, and it flew out around the corner through the window. And so at this point, and this was like January 2nd of 2012, and at this point I was really kind of nerved by it. Like, I knew I needed to do and say something and figure this out. And so I knew there's more than just what we're told, and I know that there's also the whole disinformation and false disclosure thing, and I don't think they really understand the nature of what these beings are, and they're not from another planet. They're probably just from a higher or lower or both density or magnitude of what we call reality, and they come and go basically, and the thing is that we look for evidence in the physical plane, but really we need to look for that. We need to encounter them on their plane. They can kind of come to ours, just like we can enter, so to speak, the astral plane when we dislocate from the external and the ego. So, as much as we are generally in mundane consciousness, then it's kind of the same thing. We have to go to their plane if we really want to investigate. And again, it's like we need to use the scientific method for spiritual experiences and spiritual practices, such as what's been termed magic and sorcery and all that. I think that's basically certain methods for entering the regions of the psyche that are generally harder to get to and almost cordoned off. But if we can't protect our physical bodies, we can at least work to save the one thing that these things are after, our souls. Again, some people, the whole debate as to whether the soul exists or not, I think is kind of like, well, what's the meaning of life? Well, I think it's to give life meaning. Therefore, it's up to you. And same with the soul. Like, well, do you have a soul? Well, it's up to you. Did you build a soul? Are you building a soul? Or are you denying it? Yeah, this was pretty long, and there was some edits that I had to do, but hopefully it was somewhat revealing. And I'll see you in the next video.